YouTube's Mount Olympus has many predictable faces. From beloved legacy Let's Players to widely respected commentary channels, it's hard to find someone that's truly out of place. Most seem intuitively attuned to what audiences want and can provide that effortlessly. However, among these familiar faces, one person didn't naturally belong, yet earned his spot at the top with the kind of hard work and vision most people can't even think of, let alone put into practice. Despite not being some people's cup of tea, his sheer diligence and dedication made him one of the most successful people on the platform. Today, we'll discuss none other than game theory's MatPat. MatPat was born Matthew Robert Patrick on the 15th of November, 1986, in the relatively recently established city of Medina, Ohio. His father, Robert, was a lab tech at a powder paint company, whose job consisted of testing the clear coat they spray on cars to protect them from things like acid rain, while his mother, Linda, worked as a bank teller. In and of themselves, Matt's parents were simple people with no aggressive academic inclinations to speak of. However, according to his own recollection, they spent a lot of quality time with him and incentivized him to do well at school as much as they could. Besides consistently asking Matt what he was studying, they tried their best to take part in his homework, requesting that he teach them what he had learned at school. While this may seem minute, it sparked a love of learning for Matt, who, being a family's only child in a small town, already had little else to do besides study anyway. From a young age, he became infatuated with the idea of absorbing as much information as he possibly could and being able to relay that to his parents in a comprehensible way. It was only when he cited a phrase along with its page number from a book that belongs to a multi-volume set that his parents realized that there was, indeed, something extraordinary about their son. Matt describes his relationship with his parents as basically him being the last among equals. Despite being a kid, he was allowed to say during conversations and felt he was a part of the trio as opposed to being lesser. Equally as early onsets, and definitely personality defining for Matt, was his fascination with video games, which his parents also supported. As a matter of fact, he claims his earliest memories as a child are of those that took place in his Super Mario themed bedroom playing Castlevania on a Super Nintendo. To put it mildly, MatPat had all of the makings of a bona fide nerd. Other than a childhood accident that gave him a minor moon-shaped scar on his right palm, Matt had no impairments, but eventually he did experience issues with his eyesight and was prescribed glasses. Again, this may seem like a random detail, but Matt clarified that since he lived in a small town where extracurricular activities were very limited, his options were either sports or show choir. Due to his need to wear glasses, he wasn't really fit for football, and so Matt's fate was sealed. He was doomed to be a theater kid. Much like his previous interests, just having a hobby wasn't enough. Matt had to give it his all, and so he did. He sang in 5 choirs, became president and dance captain, and last but not least, played viola in the orchestra and performed in 6 stage shows a year. Because of his interests and general disposition, Matt obviously wasn't the most popular person, with some even speculating that his interest in theater meant he was gay. But regardless, it seems he still had a healthy social life, as in 6th grade, his friends gave him the nickname he would carry on for the rest of his life: MatPat. Whether Matt was super popular or not, it didn't seem to matter much to him, since he was willing to pursue his interests at the behest of everything else. Not only was he a chronic overachiever when it came to class, but he also went as far as to skip lunch so he could participate in even more classes, and not even ones that were specifically up his alley. Anything and everything was fair game for Matt, from creative cooking to outdoor survival. His commitment was so great it led him to take classes on college campuses during the summer, but according to him, this took its toll on his development in other areas. For example, he only had his first kiss in sophomore year of high school when he would have been 15 or 16, while many of his peers had long since outpaced him. While he did have a few girlfriends during his time at school, presumably thanks to his Ohio riz, he says they'd never get physical, and invariably, the girls would always either break up with him and go somewhere else, or cheat. It's also worth noting that said first kiss only took place because of his theatrical career, as it was with a girl who was performing in the same musical as him. Due to her moving too fast in regards to getting physical, Matt became uncomfortable, causing the end of the relationship. We stan a Volcel king, though I gotta say it probably didn't help with the gay rumors at the time. Fortunately, this didn't get him down, nor did it break his laser focus on his goals as a model student, and he proceeded to graduate valedictorian with a perfect SAT score of 1600. No small feat whatsoever. While video games were still a significant part of Matt's life, they took the back seat, while his performance in both theater and academia took the lead. He got a full ride to Duke University thanks to his stellar school history, and went to college for a double major major in theater and psychology, concentrating on neuroscience. Definitely a unique combination. According to Matt, college came and went without too much excitement, with one glaring exception. You see, Duke University is in North Carolina, where a girl named Stephanie Cordato was from. Stephanie and Matt were attending Duke at the same time, and during a video game programming class, which they were only attending in order to avoid math class, the two teamed up to make a mock version of The Legend of Zelda called The Epic of Stew, which was presumably a portmanteau of their names, Stephanie and Matthew. The two instantly got along very well, though according to Matt, she initially thought he was a gay theater kid for the first 6 months they knew each other. And again, can you really blame her when just the year prior Matt had featured in a play called Once Upon a Mattress, where he played an unusually zesty jester? I mean, fellas, just look at this guy, okay? You know what I'm saying. Believe it or not, being a quirked up white boy isn't all benefits. Some people misunderstand our extravagant sensibilities, but you gotta pay the price to be the boss. Believe me, I would know. God damn, this was a dark time. Let's just never go back to that time, that era. It's over. During his time at college, he hosted fondue game nights on Fridays, a stark contrast to other students who took their college years as an opportunity to drink and party. He stayed true to his roots and continued to take part in all kinds of activities, such as something he titled Hoof and Horn, where he and his colleagues trained for theatrical fights. Though he described it as, sometimes you just have to smash someone's head against a bench or stick your foot into someone's crotch to grind their genitalia into the dirt, or reach around behind someone, grab their head, and snap their neck, causing a quick and painless death. Not sure exactly what inspired such brilliant writing, but to each his own. He also took part in a few plays, including the one and only Urinetown, a play about a society in which a megacorporation controls all public toilets. As early as February 6, 2006, MatPat can be seen with his future wife Stephanie in a picture subtitled, "Only by force do they reveal their face in a picture with me." By October of the same year, the two were dating. For the rest of his time at university, little happened besides 3 road trips Matt did while in England, and the creation of his YouTube channel, then called MatPat13. At that time, however, it just served as a platform for him to share auditions and scenes of his theatrical performances. And believe me, I would be remiss if I didn't make a caveat here to let you witness a little bit of this for yourself.
You think that when I meet my maker, hello maker, that cat will be all dressed in red.
After finally graduating in 2009 with a GPA of 3.96, he wanted to put his plan into practice and dedicate himself fully to becoming a professional actor and/or director. So Matt moved to New York, believing it to be where he would find his success. Ideally, he wanted his degree in neuroscience not to be necessary since it was just a backup. The next 2 years, he spent traveling and working non-stop as an actor, just as he dreamed. However, he quickly discovered that this wasn't the life for him. Besides the sheer volume of work and commute being grueling with him having to live out of a suitcase, it was aggravated by the fact that it offered no upward mobility. During this time, he lived paycheck to paycheck, and every 3 months, he was out of a job. It was becoming increasingly obvious that he had to find something else as soon as possible. The only problem is he didn't know what that something else was supposed to be. Due to the economic crash that happened just a couple of years prior, the United States was undergoing a very rough recession at that time, which made finding employment very difficult. On top of that, Matt says that this is when he realized things like his SAT score, extracurricular activities, experiences in acting and directing, and even his degrees made him no more likely to get a job, as employers just saw him as a theater kid with no real experience. It didn't matter he had organized projects with upwards of 30 people and brought them to conclusion without a hitch. No one believed that those skills could actually translate into being an effective and productive employee. Even Olive Garden turned him down, but as the resumes he sent out literally every day continued to hit a dead end, Matt started thinking about what he could do in the meantime. Taking a brief break from focusing on the work aspect of improving his life, on November 17th, 2010, their anniversary of 1,500 days being together on the dot, Matt proposed to Stephanie, to which she said yes. Regardless of how dark this period was, this was a bright moment that certainly helped Matt keep going despite the many obstacles he was facing. One of the career paths that Matt had initially imagined for himself was working for a media company, but since no one believed in his potential, he made the novel decision to just produce media himself. Granted, his sights were set relatively low in regards to the possibilities in this area, he just wanted to grow big enough to get the attention of legacy companies so that he could work for them. If he could just prove that he could competently execute a creative media project that successfully attracted attention online, it would certainly get the attention of people who want to pay him. And so, Matt rekindled his love for video games and began working on a new project, Game Theory. At this time, Matt followed a web show called Extra Credits, and one of their episodes was about tangential learning, or how you can absorb knowledge inadvertently while playing video games because you're so mired in the entertainment of it, you don't even notice you're actually learning. To put it bluntly, edutainment, which is actually what my channel's whole motto is built off of. We're filling your brain with knowledge, yo! Upon being fixated on the concept, Matt noticed that no show on the internet capitalized on the intellectual aspect of gaming, which made it a very interesting prospect. Additionally, it would be a major boost to his resumes if he could prove he was good at doing things like math, extensive research, and video production, all while maintaining an easy-to-understand approach for, you know, normies. Thus, he began working, studying every other online gaming show at the time, from their editing style to even their pacing, to their logos and color schemes, all to ensure he would target the exact demographic he wanted. Since he was too broke at the time to afford equipment necessary to make gameplay videos, he settled on the essay/presentation style with images dynamically edited in. And since he also couldn't get a place that was appropriate for recording, he locked himself in a closet to narrate it. Just a month after the publishing of Extra Credits' video, Matt posted the first ever piece of game theory content on his channel, a promo, being a brief insight into what was to come.
Do you love playing video games? Are you tired of walking away from 12-hour gaming sessions feeling entertained, yet unfulfilled? Do you want to know more about the games you love without having to put in any work of your own? Well, now you can play and learn. That's right, Weboverse. Inspired by fellow gaming series Extra Credits, found here, we have created Game Theory, gaming's tangential learning experience.
So on April 18th, 2011, the first ever episode of Game Theory was uploaded, and it regards the accuracy of time travel in the 1995 game Chrono Trigger. Though it now sits at 2.5 million views, at the time it didn't get a stellar reception. But the people who did find it and watch it noticed that even if it didn't have the cleanest editing or the best audio quality, it did have actual effort put into it. Not only because it was Matt trying his best to impress a potential employer, but also because he was talking about one of his favorite games of all time. He actually cared. Said and done, just 3 months and 10 or so uploads later, Matt landed a gig as a freelance production assistant for GNet, where he worked on marketing campaigns for AAA video games in various ways. It was good that he was approaching the area he wanted to work in, but still, this wasn't quite it. And 5 months into this gig, their business relationship came to an end. By the beginning of the next year, the channel had accrued 150,000 views and almost 2,000 subscribers, averaging a few thousand views per video. While it was nothing to sneeze at, it was as far a cry as possible from the heights the channel eventually reached. And at the moment, it wasn't exactly paying dividends. In fact, it was making nothing. Within a month of his departure from GNet, Matt was hired once again, this time as a digital strategy consultant for Reviewtopia.net, a now defunct website along the lines of channel aggregators like That Guy with the Glasses and Screw Attack. He worked for the website for 6 months, and during his time there, he evaluated Google Analytics data and gave them weekly reports, along with suggestions on how to continue growing the website. He must have done his job pretty competently since he successfully restructured the page's navigation to reduce the exit rate, but just like his last gig, it wasn't the right fit for him. Oh, and since we mentioned Screw Attack, I guess it's also worth noting that, as his channel grew to 6,000 subs and 500,000 total views, he partnered with them, though that's not quite the right word. In early June, he went to Los Angeles and covered E3 on their behalf. He was also briefly hosted on the webpage of Pat the NES Punk, a fellow YouTuber and frequent collaborator with Cinemassacre, also known as the Angry Video Game Nerd. As soon as his time working for Reviewtopia ended, he became the senior data analyst for Big Frame, a multi-channel network that included early YouTube talents such as Tay Zonday, D-Storm, and Mystery Guitar Man. While he started out making Excel spreadsheets to systematize strategies for the channels they managed, he eventually got promoted to Audience Development Lead, where he reverse-engineered YouTube algorithms and did wonders with people's SEO, increasing people's average video views by as much as 50% and daily views up to 40%. He also created something called Matt Pat Mondays, where he gave weekly updates on the new findings in the field of audience development strategies. Overall, he was doing his job very well, and as a result, he stayed in this position for over twice as long as he did in his previous 2 positions. According to Matt himself, Big Frame's top channel had 2 million subscribers, which at the time meant a lot. But despite this, they only had about 100 clients, meaning they were a relatively small MCN. Because of this, it seemed reasonable that he didn't make very much money despite being overworked to the gills. After all, they probably couldn't afford to pay him a hefty salary, right? Well, that would be wrong. At one point, they accidentally shared a document document that listed how much each of their employees was making and how much work they were putting in, and Matt was simultaneously the most overworked and the most underpaid. This prompted him to immediately put an end to his 14-month-long journey with Big Frame and move on. By the end of 2012, Game Theory was approaching 50,000 subscribers and 5 million views. It's necessary to contextualize that Matt was working a full-time job while running his channel, and with his commute, he was busy from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and could only work on Game Theory from 8 p.m. until midnight and during weekends. In order to keep the upload schedule he was aiming for every other Thursday, he started to get help from his friends, Gaijin Goomba, who hosted Game Exchange and later Culture Shock, Ronnie Edwards, who hosted Digressing and Side Questing, and Austin Horrigan, who hosted The Science Of. Unsurprisingly, none were nearly as successful as Game Theory, but regardless, they did play a pivotal role in establishing the brand and connecting with the audience, so much so that many people nowadays are nostalgic about the uploads from that era. On top of that, Ronnie was helping edit the videos, and Matt was looking for ways to expand his team to increase production quality and consistency. By July 2013, when he quit his job at Big Frame, his channel was already north of 300,000 subscribers and counting, with innumerable views. It's a realistic possibility that he could have stopped his pursuit of more conventional employment and just gone all out to monetize his channel. But Matt feared that, were he to begin monetizing, he would proceed to put all of his eggs in one basket, a basket that he considered unstable and shifty. That said, he postponed the monetization of his channel to whenever it hit 1 million subscribers, and instead took up work at another MCN, Break Media, or as we know it nowadays, Defy Media. For his first 9 months there, he was the senior YouTube channel manager, meaning his job was to analyze each channel he was working with individually and give the people running it customized insight on what kind of content they should and shouldn't do. If this seems trivial to you, keep in mind that this meant personally overseeing 20 YouTube channels that totaled over 30 million subscribers and over 100 million unique monthly viewers, which, at the time, even included the absolutely legendary Smosh during its peak. If he was good at what he did at Big Frame, he honed his skills as a marketer at Break Media, helping create a viral video with over 5 million views using trend data, reducing costs in certain areas of the company by a whopping 93%, tripling call to action CTR, which basically just means he got people to click on videos a ton, and achieved a record 50,000 subs in one day via content optimization. Safe to say, he was making these people a lot of money, and he became such an integral part of the company that he supervised their merger and was of essential importance in restructuring the company after it. Regardless of how effective he was, he still struggled with some aspects of the job, such as the instances where he spent a week or so scrutinizing someone's content, metadata, and analytics, only for them to ignore the majority of it. At the end of the day, egos can get in the way of good advice, and that advice is only really worth the work that the person receiving it is willing to put in. But even with these quirks, Matt enjoyed working at Defy, so even though he also really loved doing Game Theory, it just didn't seem sensible to quit his job to focus on his channel exclusively. As time went on, however, it began looking like this wouldn't be much of a decision. Game Theory was growing by leaps and bounds, with one of its biggest and most controversial hit videos dropping in October of 2013, titled Mario is Mental, which now stands at 16 million views, wherein Matt presents all of the evidence for Mario being a psychopath.
A master willfully putting his pet into uncomfortable situations, physically injuring them with fire, laughing at and humiliating them? Mario's lucky that the Tanuki suit is the only thing that got PETA's attention.
If that weren't enough, the channel went from having less than 100,000 subs in early 2013 to a little over 1 million by the end of the year, prompting the videos to begin being monetized and Matt and Steph to take a well-deserved trip to China and Thailand. The end of 2013 was also marked with yet another addition to Game Theory's channel lineup, with a new show, Crossover, by Drake McWhorter and Kenny Landefeld, which primarily dealt with unexpected connections between in-game universes, though it was discontinued in the same year. As Crossover ended, Drake started another show under the Game Theory umbrella titled Smash History, which instead focused on the history behind Super Smash Bros. Characters. With monetization finally in order and the continually stellar performance of the channel throughout the year 2014, first hitting 2 million subs and then finally 3, working at Defy Media began feeling like a bit of a stick in the spokes. After all, due to the time constraints it imposed on him, it sometimes meant that Matt would have to show up to work on 3 or 4 hours of sleep after staying up until 3 or 4 a.m. to finish a Game Theory video. No matter how gratifying the work at Defy was, it couldn't be as gratifying as dedicating all of his time to Game Theory. Not only was GT his and only his, but there was no foreseeable limit to how big it could get. After the 3 million subs milestone, and the plethora of hit videos he'd already put out at this point, Matt took it upon himself to move away from his position at Defy as painlessly and gracefully as possible. His resignation was hardly a bridge burning, considering how both Stephanie and himself remained white label consultants for Defy's Spotify's audience development arm, which isn't surprising since Matt actually enjoyed this line of work and the people he worked with. However, the Patrick's priority was now Theorist Incorporated, and just a few months in, it gets so effort-intensive that Stephanie, who was already profusely invested in helping Matt out with GT from its inception, decided to quit her job as a consultant for biotech companies in order to dedicate all of her time to assisting him. This time around, there was no safety net hovering underneath their experiments with game theory, and the Patricks had gone all in. Though their all in might have been too much. For the 4 months following Stephanie's resignation, they worked non-stop around the clock from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. They got to the point where they filmed themselves for 12 hours straight on Christmas Day, which both of them recall as what seriously put things into perspective for them, leading them to take a step back from the work. By this point, the show's success was a virtual certainty, as it had already been succeeding and growing exponentially for a couple of years. Game theory also became a part of what is called Google Preferred, meaning it was part of a program that, as I understand it, made advertisers pay extra to place their ads in the top 5% most popular content on the site due to the guaranteed trustworthy status of these channels. They were cracking 1 million views on the regular, and in late 2014, the very first game theory video on Five Nights at Freddy's came out. The first of over 90 now, mind you, which sits at 32 million views. As the end of the year approached, they were selling bundles of game theory merchandise and comfortably surpassed 3.5 million subs, though it was still pale in comparison to their performance in 2015. By March, game theory had already cracked 4 mil, and another show was tacked onto the GT channel, A Brief History by Foot of a Ferret, which, unlike many of the other shows that were temporarily hosted on Matt's channel, wasn't discontinued, but successfully moved on to its own channel. Just 2 months later, Matt's new channel, Film Theory, was made public, followed by the creation of GT Live, a channel for his impromptu live streams where he actually played video games. Both were massive successes in their own right, and not to gratuitously aggrandize it, but Game Theory's run in 2015 had something of a Midas touch to it. Seemingly anything and everything they tried worked. The team of people working on videos doubled, GT Live went on to become YouTube's largest regular live streaming channel, while the main channel gained almost 2 million subs in just 1 year, and Film Theory amassed a whopping 1.8 million in a measly half a year, the first million of which hopped on board within a month of the channel's creation. Nowadays, subscriber counts mean significantly less than they used to, but the sheer volume of Game Theory's following is still shocking to witness. Many creators from the earlier half of the 2010s didn't make it through the halfway points, let alone continue to grow boldly. This is, at least in part, due to how comfortably Game Theory reinvented itself, with new styles of editing and formatting, but without sacrificing the feeling of familiarity that kept the original watchers coming back. It's worth pointing this out because it wasn't a fluke. In fact, it was clearly a purposeful creative direction on the part of MatPat and his team to keep the content fresh, and it definitely achieved its goal. All of this is just on the YouTube front because, behind the scenes, their work as consultants for MCNs and entities like them was picking up a lot of steam as well. In every way, this period was a peak, but for every peak, there's also a valley, and 2016 sure held a couple of valleys. It's kind of odd because on one hand, MatPat was probably the person who harnessed the hype train of Five Nights at Freddy's to its fullest extent most effectively. From his first video on the games until this day, he capitalizes on any and all FNAF-related media and gets lauded by the fanbase, even when his theories about it are considered too out there or very unlikely to be true. However, an equally popular game, at least at the time, had a fanbase that held a diametrically opposed reception to MatPat's incursions. On February 9th, Matt released the infamous Sans is Ness episode, which drew a large amount of ire upon him from the rabid fanbase behind its subject, Undertale. I get that a lot of people considered the theory far-fetched and reachy, but to me, that was always the gimmick from the get-go of Game Theory. If you go through his catalog, you can easily find other more egregious examples of theories that are way more far-fetched and controversial in nature, but those didn't attract even a fraction of the negative response that this one got him. To make matters way worse, just a few months later, his revisitation of Undertale came when he gave a copy of it to none other than Pope Francis. I should be more specific though, he gave the Pope a Steam key for Undertale, which further presupposed the Pope had a functioning Steam account, and I would guess the Pope isn't playing Left 4 Dead 2 in his free time. Of course, the game was not really expected to be played, instead it was given as a symbolic gesture due to Pope Francis having declared 2016 to be the year of mercy, and Undertale having mercy to be one of the 4 actions you can perform in every combat, so much so that you can actually finish the game being exclusively pacifist. Once again, he was lambasted, this time for supposedly using his opportunity as a representative of not just YouTubers and gamers, but of America all together to give the Pope a video game. As you can imagine, that's far from the full story. A full recording of the meeting between Matt and the Pope is available on YouTube, and it's as uneventfully benign and fitting as you would expect, as the two discuss cyberbullying. Eventually, he made a video to clarify that he didn't waste the Pope's time talking about video games, but the damage was already done, and to some extent, the bridge between MatPat and the Undertale fanbase was severely burnt.
This was our achievement as a theorist community, as gamers, as online digital creators and people who love online things. And the hate that video received in the first week. I mean, this was a video where I specifically talk about accepting others and saying no to hating other groups of people, and it got hate. Just, you gotta love the internet sometimes, man.
It's probably a safe bet to say that the main reason there are so few game theory videos about Undertale is because of Matt continually running into walls whenever he tried to broach the topic. On an unrelated GT Live upload, Matt recalled that during his meeting with the Pope, he was only actually hearing what the Pope said with a 10-second delay. You see, Pope Francis doesn't speak English, so a translator had to be present, hence that delay. This was of particular relevance when Matt laughed out loud at one of the Pope's jokes, only to realize that the part of the conversation he was laughing at happened 10 seconds prior, and that the Pope was talking about an impoverished orphan when he laughed, prompting a look of confusion and sadness from the Pope. I mentioned the Midas touch a few minutes ago, and I suppose this is what the exact opposite of it looks like. I'm also obliged to mention, however, that Matt was eventually vindicated in 2022 when circus performers played Megalovania, the theme of Sans from Undertale, in front of the Pope as he watched intently. He's rocking out. More serious issues were surfacing. Namely, Drake, a member of the Theorists, became severely depressed for many reasons, one of which was the dwindling performance of Smash history. Due to the added pressure of the bad relationship he was in at the time, he attempted to end his own life twice within 24 hours. After he communicated with Matt about his work for game theory, they mutually decided for him to become a behind-the-scenes employee to give him some relief. And eventually, Drake decided to focus exclusively on his own channel, though he remained on good terms with MatPat and the rest of Team Theorists. But not everything was negative. In 2016, their team doubled in size once again, as Game Theory, Film Theory, and GT Live reached the milestones of 7, 4, and 1 million subscribers, respectively. And due to their consistency with growth and relative brand friendliness, they also earned a level of trust with YouTube themselves, and landed them a greenlit show on the platform's subscription service, YouTube Red, which is now known as YouTube Premium. The show was called Game Lab, and it was basically the second season of a show that MatPat had already tried out on his own channel for free, called Reality Check. Basically, it consisted of Matt testing out a few game theory adjacent concepts in real life, from trying to do the parkour from games like Mirror's Edge, all the way to defusing bombs like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Though it did get pretty good ratings, it didn't turn a profit, which isn't surprising considering that the show's production value looked to be pretty high, and because of that, after 9 episodes, the show ended up being discontinued. However, MatPat still appeared on many other creators' YouTube Red shows, such as Scare PewDiePie. Meanwhile, the more silent facet of their extraordinary success was their ongoing work as third-party consultants, which, according to the Theorist Media LinkedIn page, around 2016 included over 25 brands. Some of their clients, such as Google, YouTube, Audible, and Ubisoft, aren't that surprising, given their background in online media creation and their relation to gaming. However, their consultancy expertise attracted the attention of behemoth companies like Walmart, Viacom, and Warner Bros., all of which goes to show that their knack for establishing successful business relationships weren't limited to running YouTube channels. Not that there's anything lesser about being successful on YouTube. After all, it's their mainstay, and given that they consulted for north of 150 channels, it's evident they never got high and mighty about it either. 2017 held continuous success for MatPat, with another tentative revisitation of Undertale, this time going off without a hitch and currently standing at 14 million views. As his series of videos on Five Nights at Freddy's raged on, with varying, though consistently gigantic amounts of acclaim, Matt did a 2-part video dubbed Global Gamer where he visited Japan, which not only was a welcome break to the routine, but was also unique in that it had 360 view and 8K quality. The only potential hiccup during MatPat's increasingly accelerating stride to another MVP year was a brief bit of static he had with fellow YouTuber The Gamer from Mars. In August 2017, GFM uploaded a video titled What Happened to Game Theory, which mostly covered the change in tone of Matt's videos over the course of time. And for the most part, it's pretty accurate. Basically, the videos used to be geared towards a relatively older audience and had a more pronounced educational aspect to them, along with more risque and mature topics. but as time went on, they became safer, both in their approach and the content itself. Honestly, whether you think that's a good or bad thing, there's no denying that this is the case to some extent. Every YouTuber who cares about preserving their channel's growth over time starts taking fewer risks as the content grows. It's just how the business works. If you plan on making YouTube your job, you have to be somewhat professional about it and make it as much like a show as you possibly can. However comfy or nostalgia-inducing it is for a YouTuber to get personal and hyper-transparent, in the long run, that degree of parasocial proximity usually ends in one of two ways. Either the YouTuber overexposes himself, which simultaneously takes a toll on his mental health and the content quality, or the audience at large becomes too familiar with the creator's faults, oftentimes including their more controversial opinions or their bad videos, and that familiarity breeds contempt. I know the corporate and brand-safe vibes throw people off, and I get it, but honestly, it's often the case that it's either that or the content has to come to an end in some way. I would say this is a fair criticism of MatPat, but it's hardly a criticism at all, more of an observation. That being said, GFM's video also included a bit where he mocked Matt's posts on social media, though again, this borders on insignificant as far as criticism and is mostly just comedy. Even recently, some of Matt's old tweets have resurfaced, and they are straight fire. That naked girl's mouth is huge! So much fail, so much. Hashtag facepalm. Popping humans, body inflation, knee stab wound, blackface, and the frequent hot women search may reflect poorly on me. So many hungry middle-aged women. Moreover, the important implication about this was that GFM heavily suggested Matt was having someone else run his social media, another sign of his increasingly corporate identity, along with him pandering to younger audiences. It seems MatPat took this to heart, as during an episode of GT Live, he and Stephanie reacted to GFM's video with a noticeably defensive attitude. In it, they defend themselves from the accusation of pandering to little kids, showing their analytics and explaining that when channels have a significant audience of really little kids, what happens is that they experience a demographic boom of middle-aged viewers due to kids using their parents' YouTube account to watch the content. GFM's retort was that analytics is really shoddy data as far as age demographics, and since that means there can be no evidence confirming either side of this discussion, there's not much point in arguing it either way. Another point of contention was GFM using Game Theory's Boobs episode as evidence that the channel used to pander to more mature audiences. Though contention isn't the right word, since they seem to concede that at least that specific video was indeed very racy clickbait. In his reaction to the GT Live episode, GFM points out how long they meandered about this topic, though the GT Live format itself is prone to that sort of thing since the episodes are always on the long side, meaning topics need to be appropriately milked. Now, most of this drama, if you can call it that, was pretty silly, but as far as I'm concerned, all of that was worth it for this neat little moment.
I've actually never looked at porn ever, like outside of
A lot of people think he's lying here to appear more family friendly or less horny, I guess, but honestly, I don't really doubt him. As hard as it may be to believe, there are guys out there to whom that stuff isn't very appealing, and judging from his general personality, it wouldn't be surprising to me if he's one of them. In other videos, he says he grew up in a household where even swearing was unusual, so it's not that far-fetched to think he just wasn't exposed to porn in his formative years to any extent. Or, on the other hand, it's very possible that this white boy be straight capping, yo. Unbeknownst to the theorist team and both of their audiences at the time, GFM eventually revealed that he was being messaged by multiple other relatively known content creators, congratulating and applauding him for exposing MatPat, even though he himself doesn't think he did anything of the sort. I'm never quick to claim people are envious, but in this case, there seems to actually be a demographic who resents MatPat just for the fact that he's a gigantic YouTuber who's never been exposed or canceled or had any real major controversy. The go-to excuse for this irrational hate is that MatPat is fake or is a persona online, but no matter how far back in his history you go, or even if you catch him in real life, he's just as much of a peppy theater kid, whether you find that wholesome or extremely grating. Besides this very rare occasion of MatPat finding himself at odds with another creator, the next 2 years were a breeze, with one glaring, painful exception. While it was kept under wraps for the most part, from late 2017 onwards, Matt and Stephanie were expecting their first child. Due to the couple's steel resolve insofar as keeping the show running smoothly, they powered through GT Live recordings despite the difficulties pregnancy brought to the table. As mid-2018 rolled by, the full term was approaching, meaning that their child was soon to be born. They announced it in March, and seemingly the best moment of their lives was fast approaching. But then, something unexpected happened. While their business was going well and their personal lives were going great, someone else in their team was experiencing something very different. Ronnie. As they were communicating about a project Ronnie was working on, Ronnie suddenly fell silent. After a couple of days of said silence, they decided to go to his apartment to check on him, only to be met with a coroner's notice. On July 4th, Ronnie had taken his own life. While this is a very traumatic event for anyone to experience, there wasn't a lot of time for Matt to process it, as the very next day, he was in the hospital with his wife, who was getting ready to give birth to his son. He waited a bit to address what happened with Ronnie publicly, both because they were still dealing with having a child, but also because they were trying to establish a line of communication with Ronnie's family. But due to the rocky relationship that Ronnie had with them, that wasn't possible. And as the news began to leak, he decided to make a statement through the Game Theory channel on July 25th. He also took to his subreddit to further contextualize the situation. Some of you know that in the aftermath of this year's E3, someone complained about Ronnie being rude at one of the booths and posted about it on Reddit. The story eventually spread to YouTube. Because his death happened a couple of weeks after E3, it's understandable why these things would be conflated. However, behind the scenes, there were a lot of other personal issues Ronnie was working through at the time. From our investigation, while Ronnie himself didn't realize when/where the transgression occurred, others witnessing his behavior at the event saw how there could be validity in the claims. As I mentioned in the video, Ronnie often struggled to understand how his behavior would be perceived by others. It was rarely, if ever, meant to be malicious. On our side, Ronnie was not fired over the incident. We didn't yell at him or anything like that. This was the first time we'd ever heard a complaint about Ronnie at an event like that, so we chalked it up to being a misunderstanding and moved on. I think it's important to say this because my relationship with Ronnie has been one of the longest in my life. Clearly, he was an important collaborator and a longtime friend. He kept right on working for us just as normal after E3. We spoke to him on July 2nd on the Pokemon video he was set to deliver, and he was positive, upbeat, and looking forward to delivering his next edit draft. Obviously, if I had even an inkling that something was wrong, I would have done everything possible to talk to him, be with him, or support him in whatever way I could. Since he didn't give us any clue that something was wrong, or we weren't able to read the signs, none of us would have that chance. I can't tell you how tough it is to say that.
What I can say is that he did his best to move on, to strike out on his own, to move beyond the trauma of his past, to take his mental health into his own hands and take his recovery seriously, one step at a time, every single day.
I can only imagine how gut-wrenching the situation must have been for everyone involved. Hopefully, Ronnie's in a better place. 2018 went on uneventfully as Matt and Stephanie enjoyed their newborn. 2019, however, is a much different story. From the get-go, Matt found himself once again dealing with drama coming from other creators. This time, he was being accused of plagiarizing a video by Legal Eagle. The video in question was about the legality of copyrighting a Fortnite dance, and though seemingly innocuous and silly in nature, it elicited enough revolt in Legal Eagle to accuse MatPat of deliberately and maliciously copying his video. While Eagle's accusation is no longer up, Matt's response on Twitter still is, and it contains the comment he left on Eagle's video, which reads as follows. We started research into our own episode on the Fortnite dances on November 21st, when the 2 milli issues really started to take off, with a version 1 draft being finished December 12th, over a week before your video was posted. I have email chains and dated drafts to prove all of this. You say our analysis sounds like it came from a real lawyer, and that's because it did. Over the last year, since we've started covering more legal issues in the entertainment space, we've brought on consulting lawyers to help educate us on relevant case law. And yes, while there may be similarities between our videos, it's because we're both stating facts about the law. It's disappointing to see that you, as a respected professional in your field, would jump to conclusions based purely off circumstantial evidence, telling your audience I ripped off your video, instead of addressing this to me in a private forum first and asking for my stance. People were quick to side with MatPat on this issue, including Legal Eagle himself, who realized he may have gotten things mixed up. Thankfully, it seems the two made up and are on good terms since they have just recently collaborated. But this was just the first of a few controversies 2019 had in store for MatPat. Next up was a misgiving related to an indie game called Heartbound, which Matt played on an episode of GT Live. In the thumbnail, tags, and title, the game was likened to Undertale, solidifying that this game is Matt's arch nemesis. They also got the name of the game's studio wrong in the description and didn't link to the game in the description. These were the criticisms levied against Matt by the developers of Heartbound themselves, Pirate Software, on Twitter. The developer also took to his website to say, on November 26, 2016, we launched a demo of Heartbound and Steam Greenlight loved it. We hit rank 1 and Heartbound was greenlit in just 10 days. A number of people also attacked us saying we were ripping off Undertale, but the majority was really positive. Even so, I reached out to Toby Fox over email to see if he had any advice. He responded stating that Heartbound reminded him of Secret of Evermore with the graphical style of Mother 3. Now we're at today, with an email and Twitter inbox filled with questions asking if I'm Toby Fox, how long Toby has worked on Heartbound, or why I stopped working on Deltarune to make Heartbound. Except, I'm not Toby Fox. Keep in mind this quote has been cut down a bit to avoid non-information portions. I'm sure it must suck to be constantly compared to another person in their game, but to be honest, when you release a game inspired by Earthbound, Heartbound, with a pixelated heart as its main visual motif, a year after the release of Undertale, which was massively famous, you honestly have no room to complain about comparisons. Whether it was done intentionally to mimic Undertale's style or not is not really important. If the game is good, so what if it took elements directly from another game? It's clear the dev doesn't mind admitting he mimicked the graphics from the mother series, so how bad is it when it's Undertale? Just because it's more recent? Regardless of what the exact case is, the Undertale-related attacks from random viewers got under the dev's skin enough that it caused this overreaction to Matt's livestream. That being said, screwing up the dev's name is not good, but there's no and never has been any obligation for Let's Players to link the games they're playing in the video's description. People actually rarely do that. At worst, Matt's team did some heavy-handed clickbaiting because he knew Undertale was still hotly discussed at the time, but then again, there's nothing really wrong with clickbait as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. At no point is the metadata deliberately misleading, and Matt makes it exceedingly clear the game he's playing isn't part of the Undertale franchise, so you can't really fault him for other people being dumb enough to think otherwise. What's bizarre about this whole situation is that even after Matt explained these things on Twitter, the dev replied saying that the tags were at fault for confusing people into thinking that Heartbound was made by Toby Fox, when the tags of videos weren't even visible anymore at that time. Last but not least, Toby Fox himself also weighed in, taking the dev's side and reinforcing that all games should be linked, saying, "You went too far this time." Again, I can't help but think that part of the reason Toby took to defending this asinine point is that he already wasn't a big fan of MatPat due to his known dislike of the game theories on Undertale. Regardless, Matt did apologize for being potentially misleading with his video, and the Heartbound dev thanked him, and the matter was settled. In retrospect, I hope everyone involved in this situation sees how small, random, and honestly pointless it was, but around the same time, something much more serious happened. Though this matter was only talked about in January of 2019, the whole thing actually took place in 2018, but Matt wasn't able to discuss it at the time for legal reasons. As he retells it, Defy Media, the MCN he'd worked for in a myriad of different ways for a number of years at that point, first laid off a bunch of employees without warning, and then proceeded to shut down completely, all while owing the 50 creators that operated under their banner a total sum of $1.7 million. MatPat explains that the way MCNs work is basically a Ponzi scheme. They convince creators to join, promising a kind of institutional support that they rarely, if ever, deliver, and then they receive those creators' monetization checks first, take out their percentages, and then let the rest of the money flow through to whom it actually belongs. The thing is, the fact that they get the money first allows them to present themselves to investors as if the total amount of income is actually theirs, which is very attractive to legacy corporate entities interested in getting into the online media business. So, legacy media gets invested into these MCNs and keeps working to make the company look like it's growing, when in fact it's more akin to a speck of dust that lucked its way into floating on top of the actual moving parts of the business, which is the people making content.
You would have MCNs getting all this ad revenue money from checks that didn't belong to them, and then ultimately go around bragging about how much money they were earning in the press, in blogs, to their big business contacts, saying, "Look at how rich and successful we are. Don't you want to invest your money in us, become a part of our business, make it bigger, more successful, and then we all make tons of cash?" Hoping deep down inside to sell off before the bottom fell out of this whole Ponzi scheme. They were businesses that were founded with good intent, but ultimately built on nothing.
Success, at least for the people running the MCN, looks like tricking gigantic companies into buying them all together, only to find out upon further inspection that the MCN is a financial Trojan horse that's basically worthless. Example given, Maker Studios, which Disney bought for over $500 million. Defy Media was angling the best they could to do exactly that, but after taking out loans with their senior creditor, Ally Bank, and being unable to pay them back properly, they began offering them the company itself as payment, which Ally Bank refused. When something like that happens, it means there's blood in the water, and soon everyone will know that the company is completely worthless, which would then lead them to lose all of their leverage. To prevent that from happening, they basically nuked the company before it could be rightly gutted for parts by its constituents, and in the process of doing that, kept the content creators' money. MatPat was just one of the MCN business model's many victims, and thankfully, he decided to articulate it publicly in a video, which was instantly praised. In a follow-up, Matt explains how Defy's remaining assets were frozen by creditors, meaning the entities that had given loans to Defy had decided to keep Defy's money for themselves. The only problem with that is that Defy's money wasn't actually their money, it was the creators' money, a fact that the creditors weren't particularly interested in acknowledging, given they stood to keep it for themselves. To this day, it's unsure if any justice will ever be done in regards to where that money actually went. And to be clear, it's not the creditors' fault, it's Defy Media's fault and the people running that company. Besides this massive controversy, which roped in massive massive channels. In 2019, Matt also had a much more minor participation in a FNAF-related spat over what constitutes the rightful usage of fan art in promotional material, which I guess also falls under the labyrinth of copyright and fair use, and as you can expect is a very tough thing to trudge through. However, MatPat was widely acclaimed for his take on this topic as well, so it's difficult to even call it a proper controversy. Fortunately, despite this uniquely jagged start to the year, great events also took place, as in December, the Theorist team ran a 9-hour charity stream for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. With the help of a multitude of different YouTubers who took part in it, it managed to raise well over $1 million, $500,000 of which came directly from none other than Scott Cawthon, creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, who was actively following the stream. The charity live stream for the St. Jude's Children's Hospital was such a success that, after a year, they did it again, this time managing to raise $3 million. The following years also had charity live streams, and I gotta say, it's pretty great when YouTubers team up to do stuff like this. 2020 was a surprisingly busy year for Matt, who launched his third theory channel, Food Theory, 5 years after having launched Film Theory. The channel gained 1 million subscribers in the first week of its launch, and another 1 million over the course of the next 4 months that succeeded. As of the production of this video, it's rapidly approaching 5 mil, marking yet another raving success in MatPat's career. 2022 saw the announcement of the 4th and final addition to the Theorist channel, which was later revealed to be Style Theory. Though the channel was only launched in early 2023, it apparently was an idea in Matt's head as early as 2014, with the channel itself being created in May of 2015. Late 2022 also marks when the Theorist channel was sold to Lunar X, a software development and global media company. In the video he published about it, he explained that it would simply help lighten the burden of running their entire operation, and that he and the Theorist team would continue personally producing and hosting all of the shows, just with a little more outside help than usual when it came to the resources. In early 2023, the last remaining non-game theory show that was on the Game Theorist channel, The Science by Austin Horrigan from Shoddycast, was finally taken off the channel and began being reposted to Austin's channel due to him having left the Theorist team. To no one's surprise, he left on good terms with Matt and the rest of the team, as he retells in his video about the reasons he left. Isn't it a breath of fresh air for someone on YouTube to have their former employees not drop exposés on them? Anyway, parallel with the launch of Style Theory, Matt finally fulfilled his dream of working in theater, as he co-produced the Broadway thriller Grey House. It's pretty shocking to see how far this guy has come, from his humble, poorly recorded first episode of Game Theory as an unemployed, aspiring actor, to a decade later having 40 million combined subscribers and billions of views over 5 different channels, and being the co-owner and president of a company with over 30 employees. As someone who has YouTube as their profession as well, it's pretty inspiring to see a YouTuber actually build an online media empire completely from scratch. And hopefully it's been inspiring for you too. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave MatPat alone.